Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be watching and reacting to Joe Scott. He is going to be telling us about the Bhopal gas tragedy, the worst industrial accident of all time. Of all time. I didn't realize it was the worst industrial accident of all time. I know a little bit of the Bhopal gas tragedy. It happened in the 1980s in India. It was like an American-based company that was in charge of it. There's a lot of like cost-cutting measures that they did, like cutting corners and stuff like that. I didn't realize it was the worst industrial accident of all time. Um, Interesting. Okay. Let's see. What does this say? On December 2nd, 1984, the city of Bhopal, India suffered a gas leak from the Union Carbide plant that killed tens of thousands of people and is still crippling the local population more than 35 years later. It is a story of economic inequality, corporate negligence, and human resilience. Wow. Okay. I didn't realize it was the worst industrial accident of all time. Yeah, okay. Well, I watch and react and commentate on this channel. So today we're going to be watching, reacting, and commentating on this incident here. And my journey is one of learning and spreading knowledge, hopefully. Um, uh, so that's what I'm doing here. That's what I'm doing here. We're gonna watch this and learn a little bit more so I can talk about it in the future if need be, and maybe someone's watching that hasn't, learned of this incident before either. We can learn together, right? Wow. Okay. Um oof. Worst industrial accident of all time. I'm subscribed to Joe Scott. What does he do? I don't remember him. I'll be honest. I'll be real honest. I don't really remember this guy. Mysteries that were solved with Google Street View. I don't actually remember watching that video. Maybe I did. It doesn't look like I've watched any of his videos here. This is why we can't go to Antarctica. I remember watching that video. Did I watch that on this channel? I don't think I've watched that on this channel. Um, I think that's the only video of his that I've watched. Weird. This is from Exlo. This is from a movie. This is not like anything real. This is from like a bad like 1980s movie. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I don't I don't know. There must have been some reason why I subscribed to him. Anyways, maybe we'll find out now, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and give this a watch, Mr. Joe Scott here.
This video is supported by ExpressVPN.
I The juxtaposition here, you have the title, Worst Industrial Accident of All Time. The first few frames, hey, here's this advertisement, ExpressVPN. We're going to talk about something tragic, but let me just tell you about ExpressVPN first.
There's a town called West Texas.
Okay.
It's not in West Texas, it's just north of Waco, which is kind of more on the east side of Texas, but it's called West Texas. This is a real town. This is not an Abbott and Costello routine. It's a small town farming community, and one day back in 2013, a guy named Derek Hurt and his daughter Chloe were driving around, and she noticed that a building was on fire. He recognized it as a local fertilizer plant that made fertilizer for the farmers around there. And, the first responders had already been called. There were a dozen or so firefighters out there fighting the blaze and everything. So he didn't really have much to do, so he got out his phone and decided to record it. And what he recorded was this.
Yeah.
Dad? You okay? I can't hear. I can't hear. Get out of here. Please get out of here.
Luckily, both of them escaped
Wow.
unharmed, but many others weren't so lucky. 15 people died, most of them first responders, and 200 people were injured in a blast that the U.S. Geological Survey measured as a 2.1 magnitude tremor.
These fertilizing chemicals are they're most factory chemicals are dangerous in this sense, where just the right, right incident will cause things to explode. I remember there was a train derailment in Ohio. Was it earlier this year or was it late last year? I don't quite remember. But that was one of the main concerns as well, because these chemicals were like the train derailed and these chemicals were leaking all over the place. And yeah, one of the main concerns was, an explosion is like in this instance. So that, like, the city was evacuated. Also, the chemicals were extremely toxic and harmful, and they were seeping into the groundwater. And then nothing really came out of that. Unfortunately, the citizens were allowed to go back, but, like, that whole land area, the water is all contaminated and toxified now. Man, it really feels like there's a lot of negligence when it comes to the handling of factory chemicals all over the place.
100 people were injured in a blast that the U.S. Geological Survey measured as a 2.1 magnitude tremor.
Didn't this something like that also happen in Beirut as well? I remember something like that happening in Beirut as well. Like a huge factory explosion because of the chemicals, fertilizing chemicals.
Where the plant once stood, there is now a 93-foot wide crater. The cause of the fire has never been fully understood. Some people suspected that it might have been deliberately set. There's not really been any proof of that, but whoever started it, however it got started, it eventually hit the 240 tons of ammonium nitrate that they had in storage. That, by the way, is what they used in the Oklahoma City bombing, except they only had a truck full of it. The West explosion was insane, and one of the biggest warehouse explosions ever on record. Until last year. On August 4th of 2020,
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay.
fire broke out in Warehouse 12 in the port of Beirut. This warehouse was holding, and you can't make this up, folks, fireworks. And 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. There you can see
That's
the fireworks
crazy.
going off in the smoke cloud. And there you can see the ammonium nitrate. According to Wikipedia, this caused 207 deaths, 7,500 injuries, and caused $15 billion in damage. The explosion was equal to a 1.1 kiloton bomb and could be heard as far away as Cyprus. Companies often work with hazardous chemicals, and these are just a couple of extreme examples of what can happen when things go wrong with those chemicals. But neither of these disasters comes close to what happened in Bhopal, India in 1984. Not only did it kill far more people, but unlike these examples, it did it without making a sound.
So there was no explosion or anything, I'm assuming, right? Is it just ground runoff? Is it chemicals in the water? I actually don't know too much about the Bhopal gas tragedy. I just know I've heard of it. And I've only just really heard of it very recently. It wasn't even really known to me prior to me starting to learn more about India. Hmm. Oh my God. That was very just random. Also, he has a slight buzz in his background audio. I might try to clean that up so you guys might not even hear it.
Not only did it kill far more people,
Yeah, I can hear it, but I'll try to actually clean that up a little bit maybe on my end.
but unlike these examples, it did it without making a sound. To understand what happened in Bhopal, we have to first establish what was going on in the city at the time. Bhopal is the capital city of Madhya Pradesh, and its history goes back at least 300 years, maybe more than 1,000.
Oh, I didn't realize it was the capital city of Madhya Pradesh. Whoa.
If the legends of the founding are true. Interesting thing about Bhopal, for about 100 years, it was ruled by a dynasty of women called the Begums. That's a title, not a name, by the way. Modern India is a constitutional republic, so that party's officially over, but the royal heirs basically live like Bollywood Kardashians. They're huge celebrities in India. But
Interesting.
anyway, in the middle of the
Never
20th
heard of
century,
them.
Bhopal grew into an important industrial hub in India. It grew from about 100,000 people in 1950 to 2.4 million in 2021. But as it tends to happen, the economic growth didn't affect everybody equally. When you talk about what happened in Bhopal, it's as much a story about economic inequality as it is about corporate negligence. In 1984, the city was home to around 784,000 to a million people, depending on who you ask. Seriously, the numbers are all over the place. But about
that's
20%
pretty
of
close.
people there lived in what are called kucha homes. These are homes that are kind of made out of wood.
Wow, what? This is like a really put together kucha home?
whatever scraps they can find to put them together with. They're usually temporary in nature. Shanty towns might
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a shanty town. This is like this kind of reminds me of like the tent cities that pop up in California, uh, where like all the homeless people like coalesce and get together. It looks very similar like this because they set up these tents and or they just gather a bunch of resources from around where they are and put them together. I should say that's what they look like, but I know a lot of the cities like the governments, the police force went through and like enforced them out.
be another name for this kind of neighborhood. And I use the present tense on that because people are still living like that today.
Oh
Back
wow.
in '84, most of these Kucha neighborhoods were concentrated in the northern
Yeah, the income inequality is really really bad.
industrial part of the city, whereas the wealthier people live further south in what are called puka homes, which might be
Puka.
traditional homes like you and I might experience, or flats or apartments. And smack dab in the middle of those Kucha neighborhoods in the industrial north was one of the city's biggest employers. It was a chemical plant run by United Carbide India Limited, or UCIL. The plant was an important employment hub in the town. Over 1,000 families made their living off of it, not to mention hundreds of businesses around it that sort of fed off of that ecosystem. When the plant was built in 1969, the world was going through a bit of a green revolution, especially in India. And what that means, at the time anyway, was lots of pesticides. Pesticides didn't always have the stigma that we apply to them today.
Pesticides are the worst. Pesticides, I truly believe pesticides are causing a lot of health issues in a lot of people, a lot of cancerous issues. There's too much pesticides on our food, too much pesticides in our runoff water. That's the main issue is when pesticides are used, it seeps into the ground, it seeps into the water, and then it dilutes into the water. Well, that same water is the water that we end up drinking, or the water that's used, to give to our livestock, or the water that's used, to water the plants and whatnot. It's not good. It's not good.
Once upon a time, they were a godsend. They made it possible for developing nations to feed their people and get rid of food insecurity. So the Bhopal UCIL plant was a huge producer of these pesticides that were so important to them at the time. And the two brand names that they made specifically were called Sevin and Turmeric. Both
Never
of
heard
these
of either.
pesticides were produced with a chemical called methyl isocyanate, or MIC. And originally it was produced in a plant in West Virginia and shipped over to India, but to save costs, they decided to start producing it locally at the plant in Bhopal. So after getting special
Oh, so it was pesticide specifically used for India?
permission to manufacture poison gas from the city, they opened up the new MIC production facility in 1979. So to make methyl isocyanate, you need a couple of ingredients. One is phosgene, which was an actual chemical weapon that was used in World War I. And the other one is methylamine, which, if that sounds familiar at all, is because you probably heard it in Breaking Bad.
Yep.
Because it's used to make crystal meth. So you
Yep.
need the phosgene and methylamine to
I know that.
make methyl isocyanate, and you need methyl isocyanate to make the two pesticides Sevin and Turmeric. By the way, if you're wondering what exactly these two pesticides were designed
How many cameras does this guy have? Or is he just setting up the camera and moving it around? No, this is a completely different camera. Like the balancing is all different. Huh.
to kill, the answer is pretty much everything. Old school pesticides weren't picky.
Yeah.
According to the Missouri Botanical Garden, Sevin is toxic to, quote, a broad range of insects on certain fruits, berries, nuts, ornamental flowers, trees, shrubs, and on lawns. It's also toxic to bees, aquatic invertebrates, and,
Humans.
of course, humans. The other pesticide, turmeric, is highly regulated, but a spoonful of it can kill a rhino. It's also used as a rat poison and, trigger warning, but burglars have been known to use this to kill guard dogs when breaking into houses.
Weird. Very weird. Also, why the trigger warning? He gives a trigger warning about dogs dying, but he didn't give a trigger warning for the entire video where tens of thousands of people have died. Okay.
Yikes. Now, it should be said there's nothing inherently evil about these pesticides. Chances are you've eaten something that was grown with their help. But they are powerful
Probably.
chemicals that require special handling, or else things can go wrong. And within a couple of years of producing their own MIC in Bhopal, things started to go wrong. On Christmas Day in 1981, a phosgene leak killed one worker and sent another one to the hospital. Less than a month later, a second leak sent 25 people to the hospital. Clearly, there was something wrong at this plant. Part of the problem was just simple budget cuts. Union Carbide had a couple of other plants that made MIC. One was the one in West Virginia, another one was in France, and both of these had computer systems that were designed to stop leaks. The one in Bhopal was supposed to be a copy of the one from West Virginia, but it had $8 million slashed from its budget, so they couldn't afford the computerization. This means that operators had to detect and respond to problems manually, and there were only 8 shutdown devices when 24 were the standard. Now that said, some analysts have...
What? Okay, so why were $8 million cut out of the budget? Just because it was India? That's what I'm assuming, right? They cut it because of India.
Suggested that this was actually adequate to keep the plant from running into a problem, except maybe one in every million years or something like that. If things were done correctly, as we are about to find out, that was not the case. There were 3 underground tanks for storing the plant's MIC, each with a 60-ton capacity. 2 of the tanks were for top quality MIC, the 3rd tank held runoff or waste product, and the operating instructions said that no more than half of each tank was to be filled. And all 3 tanks had refrigeration units to keep them cool. They all had safety valves to prevent explosions. Now, could they have had more redundancy in this system? Yes, they could have, but again, some analysts say that that was sufficient for the time. So what happened at Bhopal is very complicated. Corporate greed obviously plays a big hand in it. Race plays an issue. I'll let the commenters go to town on that one.
That's my assumption. I here's the unfortunate thing, man. It's even today, even till this day, the racism towards Indians is really, really bad. It's even more so prevalent now, I think, as well, just because of the onset of like social media and stuff. I was on Twitter, I know, right? But I was on X today, and it's like, it's like the floodgates have been opened recently, and just people are just openly racist towards Indians, and I just don't understand. I really just don't understand.
But in the early 80s, India went into a famine. Crops began to fail, farmers ran out of business, and the need for pesticide went down. So UCIL and the parent company Union Carbide, they did what companies do. They slashed costs, they cut corners, they got rid of production and staff. Many of the more skilled workers went off to find new jobs elsewhere, and basically the plant was being maintained by a skeleton crew.
Is this a movie? A Prayer for Rain? Revolver Entertainment. I'm assuming this is a movie or documentary.
The problems began to pile up, but they didn't go unnoticed. In fact, Union Carbide sent some of their own inspectors after the 25 people went to the hospital after that leak, and they found 61 safety violations. 61 safety violations that constituted, in their words, a risk for a serious incident to occur. Union Carbide claimed to have an action plan in place, but this was not enough for Indian journalist Rajkumar Keswani. He became an outspoken critic of UCIL and wrote a series of scathing articles claiming corruption and incompetence at the plant and warning of an impending disaster. Referring to the open kucha houses that surrounded the plant, he described Bhopal as, quote, a city on the edge of a volcano. His passion for the story stemmed from the fact that the person that was killed in 1981 was a personal friend of his. Unfortunately, his passion for this went unheeded, and the plant continued to cut costs and fall behind on maintenance issues. For example, a refrigeration unit was deactivated in June 1984. In October, the scrubber was taken offline. The scrubber is basically a gas vent that was supposed to spray a neutralizing agent while the plant was operating. Now, for the record, neither the refrigeration unit nor the scrubber by themselves would have caused this accident to take place. In fact, there was a third failsafe, it was called a flare tower, that would actually burn off any chemicals that might have leaked. At least,
oh yeah, burn the chemicals so they go up in the air and cause caustic rain.
There was one until November of 1984 when that got taken offline, supposedly to be repaired.
What? This is so weird. Why?
That repair kept getting delayed. So, let's review. You have a city with a massive population of low-income people living in shanty towns around a chemical plant that's producing an actual chemical weapon with 61 safety violations on their record, 2 deadly accidents that have already occurred, and 3 fail-safes that have now been taken offline. Never before has the stage been more set for a massive disaster to occur. And on December 2nd of 1984, that disaster finally struck. Sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. on the night of December 2nd, an order was given to flush the pipes that lead phosgene into the MIC tanks. And unbeknownst to the crew that night, a safety valve that prevented this water from spewing into the tank had been uninstalled, which allowed water to flow into the MIC tank. The name of this particular tank was tank number 610, and at the time, it had 42 tons of MIC in it. Now, you might remember that this was a 60-ton tank, and it was only supposed to be about half full, so it had 12 tons of extra MIC in it than it was supposed to have, and now water is flowing into it. Water that undergoes an exothermic reaction when it comes into contact with MIC, so now the pressure and temperature in this tank is rising. At 11 p.m., the pressure in tank 610 is now 10 psi. Just 30 minutes before, it had been 2 psi. Around 11:30, workers report that they can smell a leak around the tank, plus they can see yellowish water coming out of a branch of the relief pipe. So to neutralize the leak, they activate a water curtain that sprays around the tank, and then they go on a tea break. Yeah, that sounds bad, but in fairness, some have reported that they were actually kind of reconvening to sort of discuss what to do next. And while they were discussing over this tea, the pressure in the tank continued to rise. By midnight, it was at 55 psi. Now, at some point, the temperature in the tank exceeded 300 degrees Celsius because the concrete around one of the tanks began to crack and buckle. I say at some point because the temperature indicator on this tank had been offline and had been for a long time. The only reason that we know that it reached that kind of temperature was because of the effects that it had on the concrete.
That's crazy. I didn't realize it would get that high temperature-wise.
Okay, so now things are starting to get serious. A safety
but I
valve
mean,
is popped,
yeah,
and
it makes
report
sense.
hearing rumblings in the tank. Operators try to activate the scrubber, but it fails. We don't know exactly why, but it's thought that maybe the neutralizing agent had run out. Next, they tried to raise a water curtain, but the sprayers only went up 10 meters, whereas the vent hood that they needed to reach was 30 meters high. They tried to activate the refrigeration unit, but apparently the Freon had run out of that. Like, this sounds like a massive comedy of errors. Like, I imagine these guys running around in double speed, like a Benny Hill sketch, with just one thing going wrong after
I don't
another.
imagine that. That seems a little insensitive, but yes, it is a one tragic mishap after another for sure. It's wow. I would hope that whoever was behind this, what is the company? Union Carbide. I don't really know them. I hope they got. I hope the justice was served for the 10,000 people, tens of thousands of people, but I have a sick suspicion that is probably not the case. Most of these corpos never get the justice that they're deserved.
But there's absolutely nothing funny about what happened next.
Then why lead up with the Benny Hill reference? Like that was this though the insinuating it to Benny Hill is completely unnecessary.
I imagine these guys running around in double speed, like a Benny Hill sketch, with
just that whole statement right there is completely unnecessary.
One thing going wrong after another. But there's absolutely nothing funny about what happened next. By 1 a.m., gas could be smelled in the slums around the plant. Now, about 30 minutes prior, the supervisor had run the alarm, so some people had already fled the scene. But he only ran the alarm for a few minutes. Nobody really knows why he stopped it. Maybe he thought that they had gotten a handle on the situation. But they had not. Those who slept through the alarm, and I'm sure I would have been in this group, only were woken up because their eyes were burning.
Wow.
And they had searing pains in their chest and a pervasive cough that only went away after their throats closed up, causing them to suffocate to death in their beds as the gas silently permeated their open homes. By 1:15, the police arrive on the scene to find the area in total chaos. People running around uncontrollably, coughing, choking to death on hands and knees in streets that are already littered with bodies. One of the first on the scene is Police Superintendent Swaraj Puri, who suffered some burns to his eyes. He went to a nearby hospital and got treated and then came back to conduct crowd control. Sometime between 2 and 2:30 a.m., workers were finally able to reseat a safety valve and get the leak to stop. But at this point, 40 to 45,000 kilograms of MIC were floating in a cloud over the slums of Bhopal. Apparently the workers realized how much had escaped, so they turned on the alarm for good this time. And by 3 o'clock, Army engineers arrived, trucking people to the hospital hundreds at a time. By the time the sun came up, 12,000 people were being treated at nearby Hamidia Hospital, and by the next morning, it was 55,000 people. For perspective, Hamidia Hospital had 1,200 beds. Over the next few days, some 170,000 people were being treated in hospitals around Bhopal, and they weren't all just from the slums. The winds carried the MIC cloud from the north down to the south, eventually covering 20 square kilometers of Bhopal. Granted, the poorer sections of Bhopal suffered the most by far, but it eventually affected all walks of life. The sheer number of victims in this tragedy, it reaches a point to where the numbers don't even mean anything anymore. You know, our
Well,
brains can't even
the numbers are people, and they do mean something. You shouldn't say they don't mean anything.
rationalize it. As the saying goes, one death is a tragedy, 1,000 is a statistic. But these were real.
I mean, you could say that, but you should still see it as, just realize in your mind that those are individual peoples. Those are loved ones, families, mothers, fathers, children's, sisters, brothers, cousins. Those are, those are meaningful people to others. You shouldn't just, hand wave that away.
People, and each one of these deaths was an individual tragedy, and it left behind loved ones whose lives would
See?
never be the same. Also, much like our COVID experience, healthcare workers bore the brunt of the disaster when they came into contact with the poison on the skin and clothes of their patients. One nurse described the feeling of MIC exposure as, quote, "It felt like somebody had filled up our bodies with red chilies." Like all massive disasters, the exact death toll is kind of hard to calculate. Union Carbide estimated that 3,800 people had died in the first few hours of exposure, and by the way, that doesn't include the countless number of animals and livestock. In fact, the area around the plant became a sudden wasteland as even trees and grass began to die. Now, a different estimate suggests that 8,000 people died in the first week, and that's based off the fact that 7,000 funeral shrouds were bought in Bhopal in the week following the accident, and at least 1,000 bodies were unclaimed. But workers who disposed of the bodies say that that number is way too low. One particular truck driver said that he would haul 120 bodies at a time, 5 times a day, to a disposal area. And there were 8 truckers doing the same thing.
Wow.
And this went on for 3 to 4 days, so a little bit of math puts that number at around 14,000. Many of them buried in mass graves, 5 to 6 people at a time, some of them just thrown onto log pyres. These numbers are staggering. But for every person that died, there's a dozen or so people that suffered from exposure and had long-term effects from it. These effects include ocular, respiratory, reproductive, genetic, and neurobehavioral issues. A high infant mortality rate is reported among the women of Bhopal, and many children have been born with severe physical and mental impairments.
Wow.
Cancer and thyroid problems occur at elevated rates, and the problem isn't just the gas leak. Mercury, lead, nickel, chromium, and several organic toxins have been sampled in the groundwater nearby due to faulty storage at the plant. According to a 2019 study, pollutants are continuing to contaminate and get into the groundwater and move up the food chain. There are reportedly areas around this plant that to this day are still so contaminated that you'll lose consciousness after 10 minutes of standing there. Between the initial exposure and the long-term effects...
It's that... The area is still that contaminated, and yet there's still people that live near it. That's the tragedy of it, right? You still... I mean, it's a major city. You can't just upend and move everybody, but... Wow.
It's estimated that over 500,000 people have been affected by the tragedy at Bhopal. And 75% of the people who died of COVID-19 in the last year in Bhopal were former gas survivors. One of whom was the journalist I mentioned previously, Rajkumar Keswani. He was...
Oh, that's why it's talking about COVID, because it's from 2021. Okay.
Caught in the death cloud he tried to warn everybody about, and he survived and went on to have a distinguished career. He's considered something of a legend in Indian journalism, but he died of COVID-19 on May 21st of this year. In the aftermath of the Bhopal gas tragedy, the Union Carbide company tried to claim that there was some kind of sabotage on the plant, but this was thoroughly investigated and dismissed. Kind of hard to claim sabotage when you have like 20 safety measures disconnected, guys. There was also a lot of passing the buck at Union Carbide, claiming that it was all the fault of UCIL, even though they own a majority stake in the company. This is kind of amazing.
I would hope that the Indian government stepped in and sued this company or something.
Though the CEO of Union Carbide, Warren Anderson, he visited Bhopal 4 days after the accident, and his reception was beautiful.
Why would he even go? Why would he even go? I mean, if I if I were in that town and I knew that I don't know, I would assume a lynching would have happened against this person, right?
And his reception was beautiful. He was placed under house arrest. They arrested his ass.
Well, of course, yeah.
experiencing
Wow. Just house arrest?
consequences for his actions. He posted bail in a matter of hours and then quickly escaped the country. And by the way, the person who drove him to the airport was that police superintendent Swaraj Puri I mentioned earlier. After fleeing the country, he was considered a fugitive from justice by the Indian government. They attempted many extradition requests. Needless to say, he never returned to India. He retired from UCC in 1986 and never suffered any legal consequences for what happened.
Terrible. That's absolute injustice.
Before he died in 2014, though, he did say that he had a guilty conscience about it. He had many sleepless nights and said that he didn't feel comfortable smiling or laughing in public because he thought that people might think it was inappropriate. It almost makes you feel bad for the guy.
No.
I'm kidding. F you, dude. The effort to hold somebody accountable for the Bhopal gas tragedy continues to this very day. In 2010, 8 people were convicted of death by negligence, including the former plant manager. Each of them were given a 2-year sentence and were forced to pay a small fine.
What?
But they got out on the former.
2010?
In 2010, 8 people were convicted of death by negligence, including.
2010? What? Why did it take nearly 30 years?
The former plant manager. Each of them were given a 2-year sentence and were forced to pay a small fine, but they got out on bail. The Union Carbide Corporation was ordered.
What?
To pay $470 million to victims in 1989, but after all the people had filed their claims, it came out to like $800 per person.
Oh my God.
The Bhopal factory closed in 1986 and Union Carbide was bought out by Dow Chemical in 2001. And since that happened, of course, Dow Chemical has claimed no responsibility. Victims groups remain active in Bhopal today, still seeking justice 35 years later. Though most of the direct exposure victims are now gone, still hundreds of thousands of people are feeling the effects of the worst industrial accident of all time. Industrial accidents still occur today, of course, but one of the bigger problems that they had to deal with is computer hacking. You might remember the Colonial Pipeline got shut down by a ransomware attack just a few weeks ago.
I remember
that. While you
that.
may not be dealing with chemicals or explosives, you may fall victim to this yourself. So to protect yourself, I might recommend you check out today's sponsor, ExpressVPN.
This is not appropriate. Not appropriate. Not appropriate. Not an appropriate sponsor bit. I'm sorry to say this, Joe Scott, but not an appropriate sponsor insert right now.
ExpressVPN hides your computer from the outside world by making you look like you're somewhere else by connecting you to a virtual private network. It's fast, it's super easy to install. I was able to do it with no problems at all, so if you have any competency whatsoever, it'll be a breeze, and it just works. It's just totally in the background. You just turn it on and keep.
All right, we're not going to listen to a sponsor bit from 2021 where his link probably doesn't even work anymore. Who knows? And it's just straight up just not an appropriate sponsor in my opinion. So we're not on this video. Not on this video. Wow. Okay. Crazy, man. And the worst part is, like, justice was never served. The man behind the company lived till 2014, and a few people got jail sentences in 2010, but they didn't have to serve them. The people were probably not taken care of. I'm assuming. Man. I'm just trying to see myself in that situation. It's just like it's heartbreaking. It's tragic. It really, really is. What is this? Interested in getting a Tesla? He has a link to a Tesla. Weird. Links. Okay, so these are all the sources that he used right here. The Bhopal.net is actually a website. Union Carbide enters Bhopal, 1969-1979. We help India fight its wars on all fronts in our little way. Union Carbide, sowing the seeds of progress. The irony behind that, what's to come. Unfortunately for UCC, the Indian government threw a wrench in its plans. On January 1st, 1974, India enacted the Foreign Equity Regulation Act, a statute requiring all foreign equity holdings in India companies to be diluted to no more than 40%, meaning UCC could legally own no more than 40% of UCIL shares. In order to ensure it maintained control over subsidy businesses at that time, UCC had owned 60% of UCIL shares. In fact, UCC's corporate policy manual stated that it is the general policy of the corporation to secure and maintain effective control of affiliate. For UCC, losing control of UCIL was not an option. Seeking a way to move forward, UCC proposed to the Indian government that it would start producing MIC as exclusive UCC specialty in Bhopal in return for the exemption from the FERA on the grounds that MIC production would not need high-tech inputs not available in India. The exemption was granted. UCC was allowed to keep 50.9% UCIL shares. That meant even relatively minor UCIL decisions were made in consultation with UCC management in the USA. UCC provided all process designs in Bhopal, including flow diagrams, material energy balance operation manuals. UCC provided information necessary for the construction, startup, and operation of the plant. No India-based firm had any experience of MIC-7 production. The UCC would not give up its exclusive formula and technical know-how. It only provided UCIL with necessary instructions to run the plant. The technology exchange from the USA to India was formalized in a technical service agreements. UCIL paid UCC for continual know-how and safety audits, so they paid themselves for safety audits because UCIL did not have technical know-how to take care of MIC unit properly. UCC created a design review process, meaning American engineers conducted ongoing reviews of Bhopal plant design. These reviews included safety monitoring. Wow. Unproven technology. Double standards. 50 pages long, demonstrated a blithe disregard for safety in Bhopal. Nowhere is there any mention of risks surrounding communities. The city's railway station was less than a mile away and downwind of the plant. Documents reveal instead of company was obsessed with cutting cost and keeping control of its UCIL subsidiary along with sole ownership of exclusive MIC formula. One of UCC's long-standing lies that it had no control over its Bhopal plant. That's and yet they face no repercussions. Classic example of corporate double standard. Wow. 40th anniversary. Oh, I guess yeah, the 40th anniversary would have been this year, huh? Media coverage. Bhopal victims of corporate crime are considered expendable by regional, national, internal leaders and relief orgs. What? What is this? Four organizations of survivors of the Union Carbide disaster in Bhopal today led the 40th anniversary rally to the abandoned factory site carrying an effigy of corporate crime. The marchers denounced regional, national, and international leaders and international relief organizations for the continued involvement in denial of justice and a life of dignity for the survivors. Successive U.S. presidents, starting from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama, have actively protected Union Carbide and Dow Chemical from prosecution in India, said Rashid B., president of the Bhopal Gas Pidet Mayua Stationary Karamacha Song. I butchered that name, I'm sorry. We wish President Trump puts an end to the long history of injustice in Bhopal in his efforts to make America great again. We hope he takes action against Union Carbide and Dow Chemical in line with the Republican President Theodore Roosevelt's square deal for regulation of oppressive corporations. Would he do that, though? I don't know. Let's look. Well, I just looked, I typed in Donald Trump Dow Chemical Company here really quick just to see. Um, and like the first few options here, Trump nominates Dow Chemical lawyer to oversee EPA, um, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. So it looks like he's almost like, I mean, this is from 7 years ago. A lot could change in 7 years, but Um, U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday nominated Dow chemical lawyer to head up the Environmental Protection Agency unit that oversees hazardous waste disposal and chemical spills from toxic Superfund sites. Again, this is from 7 years ago. Companies that funded inauguration came up big in 2017. What is this? Congress.gov? What is this? Um, I saw Dow there for a second. In 2016, Dow Chemical was awarded both a 1.9 million federal grant for bioenergy research and 1 million as part of an ongoing agreement with the Energy Department that companies gave $1 million to Trump's inauguration but didn't receive federal contracts and grants last year. However, Dow benefited tremendously last year in two major ways. First, the Department of Justice approved their $130 billion merger with DuPont in spite of a number of antitrust concerns that had previously delayed the merger. The new entity, Dow DuPont, has proposed in the last year as a result of the amenable EPA, which includes business-friendly leadership in Scott Pruitt and Nancy Beck in the top deputy of Toxic Chemical Division. Uh, yeah, I don't think Trump's gonna, I don't think Trump's gonna do anything about this. Unfortunately, I really don't. It's tragic, but I really don't think he's gonna do anything. So like asking him to do something. I mean, I if you get to his aides, the people he talks to, if you get to them, it might go up to the chain, but it really sounds like probably not. Um, wow. I didn't. It is very tragic. It is very tragic. Lessons of Bhopal. Um, December 2nd as well. So it really was the 40th anniversary not too long ago. It's disgusting that justice was not found for these people. Okay. Well, let's go back to the video here. We're gonna go ahead and read some comments because that's what I do typically when I do like reaction commentary videos. I go through and read some comments, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then after I read some comments, we'll roll for the next video that I react to. Extremely impressed by the young girl in the video who, instead of screaming, which would understandably and warranted, immediately started talking, letting her dad know she couldn't hear anything, but doing so with a clear, relatively calm voice. Oh, the girl at the very beginning during the explosion video. Yeah. My whole family was in Bhopal at the night of the disaster. We lived in the area that faced the gas leak, and I've grown up hearing the stories of those few days. Luckily, my family was able to survive the event, obviously not unscathed, unscratched. My family often recounts how there were bodies everywhere, how animals left tied, suffocated, and how birds literally fell from the sky. My grandmother still has scars from that night. Sorry. Um, and I too have grown with visual and respiratory impairments. Sorry. It's still just. Uh, this, however, is not uncommon in Bhopal. People still struggle with physical and mental illness caused by the leak, and there has been no proper studies done about the influence of the gas. Sadly, people of Bhopal never got the justice they deserved. The Union Carbide still stands where it did, and there still remain several containers of different chemicals rusting under the scorching heat of the city. Wow, they just left everything there too. The tragedy ruined water quality of the region, decimated animal populations, and not to mention the human cost was enormous for us who still continue to live here. The tragedy never ended. What hurts the most is that the perpetrators lived full and healthy lives protected by the American government, while my people continue to live in poverty and medical neglect. Our histories have never been properly recorded, and the night mostly exists as haunting memories. Tragic. I was 11 months old, living in Bhopal with my parents when the tragedy happened. My father decided to shut all doors and windows and stayed inside our house when everyone else was running on the road dying. Luckily, we survived because the gas couldn't enter our home. Wow. Wow. I was working with MITC every day, and we have to stress how dangerous it can be if not handled properly. I'm actually referring a lot of my apprentices to see this video to understand how serious it is. Thanks, Joe. Wow. I live in Cyprus. I can confirm feeling the shock from the explosion. No, for the Beirut explosion. I, being from Bhopal, have seen the site, which even now looks scary, and heard the stories about the night, which is enough to give anybody chills. A few years ago, I did an internship project in DMI on a Bhopal gas tragedy and got to know about it closely. It was heart wrenching. The video states facts, but it does not cover is the psychological effect it had on people that day. There are still people who have nightmares from that day. Wow. During the internship, we had company of senior officials who shared their experience, and hearing someone's firsthand experience was just painful. What happened was just ignorance, and even the worse because there are so many measures and opportunities to stop this, but no one bothered. The incident's still not very talked about and is unknown to people. I'm very thankful that you covered it very accurately. 61 safety violations in a poison factory. We won't need the fail-safe stuff, bruh. Lamau, money go burr. It's exactly what it was. Exactly what it was. The greed encapsulated everybody. They let all these things happen and they shut down the safety measures because it was too expensive to keep them going. When you said he realized it's a burning fertilizer plant, I was like, you're way too close, Lamau. What? Oh, from the first video. My grandfather's brother was one of the victims, and whenever grandfather's brother, wouldn't that just be like a great uncle? Was one of the victims, and whenever I talked about this, he never made eye contact. He described it as hell. He had lung cancer and died in 2007. I mean, it is. I mean, just imagining the scene, it does sound hellish. I work as a safety valve technician in southeastern Louisiana, and I work with valves that have this chemical and many other harmful chemicals run through them. This could easily happen in the U.S. too. We had an incident with the chemical a few years back. We work with valves that are anywhere from a few inches tall to many tons. We had one of our techs picking up a valve at a local plant to bring it back to the shop. It was very small, but about 4 inches tall. The valve was cleaned by the plant before it was picked up. This was a new tech, and he figured since it was so small, he would be able to put it in the backseat of the truck instead of putting it in the bed like protocol demands. He got a few miles before he started having breathing problems and called for help, realizing he messed up. He was rushing to the hospital and recovered, but he would have died with much more exposure. This was a cleaned valve. There happened to be some residue in the threads that caused this. Don't think you are safe because the poor don't think you are safe because this was in a poor foreign country. The chemical is here in the US and in many plants, especially here in South Louisiana and Texas. It is only one of the many dangerous chemicals being used in our backyard. I always follow protocols, take my time, and do the very best job I can because I don't think don't things like this could happen in my community. Yeah, like I said at the very beginning, something very similar happened in Ohio where a train derailed. Um, and these chemicals just leaked out and spilled and went into our water. They actually ended up going there and burning a lot of it too. I'm gonna read some of the newer comments. Um, Apparently West Texas is only an hour and a half away from me, but I never heard of this before. That's crazy. Okay. Gotta admit, I was still stuck on the brilliant minds that had decided to store fireworks and explosive chemicals at the same facility. Um, we were watching videos of people dying in explosions, but putting trigger warnings before you mention burglars killing dogs seems kind of pathetic. That's what I said. That like the priorities there are completely mismatched on that statement. This explosion was what happened in 9/11 Lone Star in the first episode. So terrible. Never heard of that. People with all the money will never see justice. True. He's such a lefty, makes it hard to watch. Why? Because of the trigger warning? I'm assuming it's because of the trigger warning. The trigger warning in his background. I didn't like his background, but I felt it was not appropriate to harp on his background right now. Like the Thor hammer and the I don't know. I don't like tat like that. But I'm not gonna I'm not gonna harp on that right now. Um, I'm a chemical engineer, and since I first heard of this accident in the university, my personal goal was to get into the career in safety environmental affairs. This tragedy itself is so horrifying and serious that it inspires a whole generation of engineers to study exclusively about safety in the chemical industry. Nowadays, we still have a lot of problems to be solved. Unsafety conditions and the companies that neglected its importance are still a thing, especially because people tried to cut the budget on safety equipment everywhere. But I think that our world already had darker times. To all my colleagues working on safety out there, I salute you. Let us study and find ways to never let a tragedy like Bhopal happen again. Industrial murder is often overlooked. I believe the people of Bhopal have never been compensated. Of course, this is American democracy, deserving and undeserving. It's not pronounced Kucha Holmes. It's Kucha Home. Also not Puka. It's Paka Home. Okay. Um, Hmm. Kami talk. Here's my like and subscribe. Is it? What did he talk? Is he talking communistic? I didn't get any of the communistic vibes from the video. The comment section is fascinating. So many close to the tragedy of incompetence. I mean, India is a big place. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people still living there today. When you think about it is kind of crazy that only 200 people died in Beirut, the massive fire that preceded the explosion may have saved many lives. Yeah, the fire was a signal fire for people to get away from it. Um, Hearing that baby at the beginning, instantly go, I can't hear, get out of here, let's get out of here. It has all my motherly cells in my body on fire. Appreciate the thought of the trigger warning, but not providing specific trigger makes it useless as a warning. People who need trigger warnings, I don't know. I can't trust people that need trigger warnings, especially on a video where you know the whole thing revolves around tens of thousands of people dying. House arrest is hardly consequence. As a chem student, as soon as I heard fertilizer factory and fire, I knew that couldn't end well. Profit over people once again. If the port of Beirut hadn't been so sparsely populated, the explosion would have killed 100,000. If you guys would like to see a movie on this, it's called Urati 2. Urati 2. Why would the Jews do this? What? What? Okay. Wow. Ineptitude and greed caused the horrible accident. Rarely Western media would cover it. Was yeah, it's because I don't know. It's just not something that's covered, I guess. Western media has a fixation, like specifically like the U.S. The U.S. really doesn't. The media really only talks about stuff that's prevalent to the U.S. Um, yeah, it's just not something that's normally talked about. But we got YouTube for, that's what YouTube's for, is to learn more. He works for Union Carbide now. I thought Union Carbide got swallowed up into Dow, and then Dow got swallowed up by DuPont. Hmm. You covered everything I was going to comment on, so I'll just say well done. And the timing of the disaster couldn't be any worse. The prime minister of the country was assassinated a month before, and there were several riots happening in Delhi. I didn't know about that either. I don't know anything about that. Or no. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 I remember. Already liked your channel, but your response to the CEO really cemented my fondness for your work. Hmm. You can just feel the lives of the people living around the place did not matter. Poor people, who cares if they live or die? Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's these companies. A lot of these, like, I don't know. I don't know. Like these corporations, these corpo people, man, they just, a lot of them just don't see the value in human life other than dollars. All right. Well, um, I think that's going to be it for this video. I think that's going to be it for this video. Tragic, tragic video. Wow. I, it's still very sad. It's still very, very sad. I just wish that the people, had justice. And there's still people today. It's only been 40 years. Okay, so we are going to roll to see what the next video that I react to will be. We have 351 videos in my react to list here. So let's go ahead and set this to 351. Generate, we're going to be reacting to 218 for the next video. 218 is going to be a bit further down. 200, 218. 4 first-hand accounts of civilization being wiped out by voices of the past. 4 first-hand accounts of civilizations being wiped out. Civilizations being wiped out. Voices of the past. I want to say... Oh, yes. Okay, I know this channel. Okay. I remember watching a few videos from this channel before, and I've really liked it. I think all my stuff got reset because it's not showing the videos that I've watched, but I'm pretty sure I've seen some of this channel here. Okay, well, 4 first-hand accounts of the civilization being wiped out. That is going to be our next video we will be watching. So I'll catch you on that one. Yeah, take care, everybody. Goodbye.